Hello and welcome back to the third segment of this week's presentation for Politics of Southeast Europe, talking about Europe and the process of European integration. What I want to talk about in this segment is some of the reasons why integration with Europe and the European idea and the identity of Europe is so appealing. And on many levels, the answer to this question is going to be obvious. First of all, these are states that are located in Europe, and it is not surprising that they should cultivate a European identity. Second, during the period of the Cold War, with the division of Europe into Eastern and Western blocs, with Yugoslavia occupying this interesting position in between those two blocs, and Albania in a position sometimes integrated and sometimes not integrated with other European blocs. The image of Western Europe appeared to be to represent a powerful alternative to what were seen as some of the shortcomings of the state socialist system. And in particular, there was objection to the use of the term Eastern Europe and the development of the term Central Europe as a kind of rhetorical alternative to the image of Eastern Europe, which was regarded as backward. The idea of Europe, and particularly Central Europe, also formed a central part of a kind of rhetoric of restoration, an idea that there was a process of political development that was natural and organic up until the Second World War, which was interrupted by first fascist occupation and second by what was seen as the dictatorship of the Communist Party, and Europe was seen as a way of restoring this direction of development. So with the formation of the European Union, you saw a kind of early integration process which was slow, which was frustrating, which seemed haphazard, but nonetheless, it was the goal of nearly every state in the region to join Europe. Why? Well, one of the reasons may be the association of Europe with values that people pursued through political activity. What's shown on this slide here is a section of the preamble of the European Union Charter of Fundamental Rights. I've copied this as an image. You may want to take a moment to look at it and to read through it. Let me point out just some of the most important elements. They talk about, this preamble talks about a shared spiritual and moral heritage, something that unites Europe. And one of the things that unites Europe, look at that second paragraph there, are universal values of human dignity, freedom, equality, and solidarity, bolstered by other categories like democracy and the rule of law. I mean, you go on through this entire statement from the preamble to the Charter of Fundamental Rights, you see a reflection of the basic political values which are at the center of the activity of many of the people fighting various forms of authoritarianism, whether it was fascist authoritarianism or communist authoritarianism or nationalist authoritarianism. And one of the things that this meant is that at the end of the period of authoritarian rule, with the decline of state socialist regimes, and then in the former Yugoslav states with nationalist regimes that succeeded them and adopted a related form of authoritarian rule, at the end of conflict, where many people saw a lot of the rights that are delineated in this charter that you see the preamble of now violated systematically, there were several reasons why the European Union was appealing for ideological, and we can call them moral reasons. Let's try to make it a little bit systematic. First of all, the European Union promised access to the prestige and power of a prominent global alliance with a record of success and recognition in the world. Second, it offered the promise that the economic prosperity that was experienced by West European states could be reproduced and spread to states outside of that orbit, and with it, the promise that freedom of movement and access to markets, particularly markets for goods and markets for labor, would allow direct participation. The European Union also seemed to promise a guarantee that neighboring states that had previously been in conflict would be able to enter into a long period of sustained peaceful relations with one another, as they would both be protected under the security umbrella of the European Union and have access to the dispute resolution mechanisms of the European Union. On the political level, membership in the European Union, because of the conditions that are imposed on things like constitutions, electoral and legal processes, seemed to guarantee that the move toward democratic political procedures and institutions and toward the rule of law would be guaranteed as irreversible. And for some people operating in the domestic political scene, it seemed as though the power and prestige of the European Union could be used domestically as a countervailing power to diminish the power of local political elites who may not share the sort of democratic values that the European promotes. Now look, this is all the positive side. Integration with Europe was seen as a way of taking the changes that occurred around 2000 that were largely seen as positive changes by significant parts of the population and making them permanent, making them irreversible. This is in fact a large part of the self-understanding of the European Union, the reason that they believe that there is or should be support for integration in the candidate states. Let's put it this way. You will often see in description of the policy of the European Union coming from the European Union, the use of terms like transformative power and the transformation of political communities and societies. And as a causal statement, the official position and probably the dominant position in a lot of academic analysis on European integration is that it's a process that involves major changes in the candidate states, changes in values, changes in practices, and changes in standards, that these are put forward as conditions, but the conditions are adopted voluntarily. They are adopted willingly because they recognize that it is in their interest. Now, there are, of course, a lot of uncertainties involved in this formulation. In particular, when we talk about transformation being in somebody's interest, in these societies, like in any societies, transformation is in the interest of some groups, but not of other groups, and it is in particular not in the interest of groups holding power that would be unlikely to maintain their power if they were required to submit to European Union standards like rule of law, or if they were required to compete with better trained and better equipped specialists or economic competitors from the European Union. So what looks like a clear statement is in fact a little bit problematic, and that's why when we talk about the promise of the European Union, we also need to talk about some fears that are associated with the European Union and with the process of integration. And what are the principal fears? These are mostly fears that are held by elites, but not entirely by elites. First, the fear that local elites will lose their influence in the society in the competition with international elites, with pan-European and with global elites. Second, there is the sense that many of the standards that states are expected to meet as part of the process of conditionality are either unappealing, that is, that they compete with popular local practices or values, or they are unachievable. They simply exceed the capacity and especially the political will of the states where the standards are imposed and are expected to be met. And then finally, as we discussed in last week's session, there are a number of concerns about the loss of sovereignty, about the loss of national identity, about the loss of uniqueness, that is to say, cultural and symbolic concerns that enter into the debate, these are probably the most popular part of objection or resistance to processes of European integration, which is one of the reasons that you see concerns like this raised frequently. Nonetheless, most states have entered this process of accession or integration, and I want to talk in the next segment about how that process is carried out.